So one of my favorite things with working with Bootstrap, one of my favorite things in Bootstrap is working with forms. It's made it so easy and made the styling so nice and appealing just by default within Bootstrap, and really user-friendly and user viewability friendly as well. This is a basic example of a form, so I've just copied and pasted this out, and I've also placed it in a well, so there is a colorful background and it highlights it a little bit more and a little bit better. So that's all I've done, is I've just placed that code within a well. And here you've got standard form, so you've got form groups, which are grouping all the different elements within the form together. So you're grouping the label, the input. What the form group really does is it allows you to wrap the labels, controls the form elements, and it creates that needed spacing for your form items. So it allows that label and that input field to look proper and look appropriate. And then again, if I haven't done this enough, bringing down, resizing, it looks just as well as it did within the desktop model on a small screen. So that's going to be the form, and that's a really excellent part about Bootstrap, is this ability for the forms. So this was just a standard form that I had pasted in, and as you can see, it's got the email address, password, input field, checkbox, and the submit button. And all we've done here is we've done labels, so we've done ID label, we've put in a placeholder, so this just shows up that kind of grayed out. It doesn't work on all browsers, the older browsers aren't going to be able to see this, but this is for newer browsers. And then the form group is just grouping everything together. We've got a form and we've put it all within a div, and we've assigned that div a class of well, so that it's highlighted and stands out a little bit more. So with forms, maybe you don't want to have a form that's this long, so you have the option to go with inline. So when we go back to the Bootstrap website, we see that they do have inline form, and all this is going to do is this is just going to place that form content in line, so it's no longer going to place it flowing down, it's just going to place it in line. And in order to do that, all you have to do is go over and add that class into the form, and just see if and that actually took care of the whole inline process of the form. And again, it works with resizing, and it's just placed everything within line. On mobile, it's actually going to look the same. So there's an example of if you want to inline it. So maybe if your form was taking up a little bit too much space, you can do a quick inline of it. So when it comes to building out forms, sometimes they can get fairly complex, and here we have an option. If you want to use Bootstrap and develop forms, you can drag and drop in forms and then get the code. So depending on what element you want it to add in, you can just simply drop it in. I'm just going to quickly add this one, and here we've got some options for buttons. So we want to do single button for submit, and you could drag it in and drop in the form items as you need to, and we could see what the source code is going to look like. So here we've got a form that we've just really easily built out using Bootstrap, and we can copy and paste that source code and use it within our Bootstrap design in order to create forms. So this is a really good source for creating out forms, or you could just go through the manual process of creating out forms. There are a few other items to mention within the form. So you see here, this was the inline form. Here they have the inline form, but they also have this input group add-on. So if you see here, what this is doing is this is grouping that input together. So instead of just having a separate input, if you want to have some grouping to it, you can do this what's called input group. And the way that that works is if you bring it into your code, and I'm just going to place that in there. So we're going to have input group. Instead of a form group, it's going to be called an input group. And when we go back to our example and we refresh it, we see that that indeed is what happens with the input group. So it adds a before and an after. So it's really good, as in their example, if you're using money to do cash transfer. There's also horizontal form. So this is going to be slightly different than the default, where you want to align in this label to the left of the form content instead of above. So there's also a little bit of customizing here where you have to add in this this class. So here all you're doing, going back to the grid format, so we're just adding in the classes for the grid control labels. So if we want it to change something, we could change one of these into that format. So changing it like that, all we had to do is add in this extra div and then this class here within the label, so indicating that we've got column SM2, so that's on a small device, that's going to be 2, and when we do shrink that down, that should go to a single row. So, and as we shrink it down, we see email address now goes back on top with the address underneath. So that's how you work with forms. And as I said, there's a lot of things that you can do with forms, and there's a lot of options. So generally people want to style out their forms. So there are a lot of options that you can work with. So here's the text area. So you can do it text input, and this is the text area down here, and this is a regular input text. So it kind of works the same, where you just do form control, you do the number of rows. Here you've got your radio checkboxes and radio buttons. So again, really nicely styled for Bootstrap, and again the same options as you normally would have, although you do have this disabled option that is available within the classes, and then that automatically disables that input. So we've got inline of checkboxes and radio buttons. Sometimes you might not want to have them horizontally, and you might want to have, vertically, and you might want to have them horizontally. So you can inline it this way, so it's just checkboxed inline, radio inline, and those are the classes that you use. Everything else here is just a standard input, other than the label class, standard input where you're doing a name, an ID, a value, and type is radio button. So checkboxes and radios without labels. So just as an example, if you don't want to label them, you can also use them. You just don't have to place a label in if you don't want to. Then also there's the selects. So those are the drop downs there. So this is typical HTML, so we're not going to look at it that much, but it does get formatted, styled in a Bootstrap type format, so it does look a lot more presentable. And again, typical HTML there, so that you've got the multiple options to select multiple items. And you want to place, as in their example says, so if you want to place, instead of that field, you want to just place some text, you can do form control static, and what that does is that just aligns it really nicely and places it within the same format as the rest of the content of the form. So normally if you placed in some text, and if you didn't include this, you might not have the same kind of nice styling as you do. And then also here you've got an option here to place some text in front of it, and again form control static, and that allows you to place that text underneath the label there. So the label acts as it normally does, and there you've got a new paragraph with your text, your static text, and then the rest of it is standard input form. So you also have focus state, which is that kind of outline that you get whenever you're clicking on it. Below you have these validation states, and as you can see, the outline goes to the same color as the validation, and just as we had looked at before, all we have to do is add in that contextual class. So this one we're going to do has success. That in, we can see that creates that kind of green hue to it. So all we had to do is do has success to the form group, and here we've got class control label. So that's going to be all you have to add in for the class for input success, and we know that this is the label for input success, and again the control form. So much like we've done in the other examples, and then this just allows you to highlight it with that control success option. As well, you've got an option here for some icons. So if you want to have these icons or glyphcons within your form fields, you can add that as well. We look at the code for that, so has success, has feedback, and then here we see that we've got our control feedback as well as our input success, and showing you within our example what that's going to look like. So it's doing the same thing as the success where it's highlighting, attaching that hue, but it's also adding in that glyphcon OK, and it's controlling it with the control form feedback. Of course, you've got some options here for icons in horizontal and inline forms, input with success, optional icons, and even controlling the size. And then lastly, with forms, you're able to do column sizing. So just like with the grid layout, you're able to do the columns. So if you want to do one field XS2, one field XS3, one field XS4, and again, these are going to work within the same way as the styling. So I think I just lost that there, but within the same way that the styling is going to work. When you do the responsive styling, you're going to see that this also takes place, that just the fields. So on a small screen, these fields are going to take across the whole width, and we see that all we're doing is adding a class here, and this is just going to be a typical grid format. So it's nothing really special about forms here on the column sizing. This is just typical grid. With forms, you could literally go on forever. So there's also the help block, and if you do want to know more about forms, you could check out getbootstrap.com and then their form control sizes, and this is going to give you a whole bunch of examples and really cool things you can do with forms.